Hash House and Circle Up.
Welcome to On, the Hash House Harrier podcast for interviews, history, and stories. I'm your host, Ra.
Today on the podcast, we are going down under to New Zealand in Auckland. Now, we're filming this before the World Interhash, so you may meet this guy. If you go into the Interhash or you've gone to Kiwi Nash hashes or you just hashed around the world, you may have met this guy. You'll see him at Interhash. Welcome. Today on the podcast, longtime hasher from Auckland today, it's Violet. Hi, Violet.
Hi, how are you, Ron?
Great. Violet, let's tell everybody your hashing origin story. When, where, and how did you get to your first hash?
Yes. My first hash was a brand new hash as well. So I was actually I wasn't the brains behind it, but they asked us to come over and have a beer and some good cooked meat. That sounded pretty good. And then the guy explained what hashing was all about. He'd come from KL. And so he had this idea. And it was a wonderful party, and that was the start of the hash. There were 15 of us there, and so we're the founding members.
When and where?
When and where? It was 1986, I reckon, probably about January. In Yaounde, it's the capital of Cameroon.
Cameroon. Was this all expats? Was it French-speaking,
Initially,
English-speaking?
Yeah, definitely. Initially, the first 15 were expats. Later, as soon as people understood it, then people brought along friends of theirs who knew that they'd like this sort of thing. But yes, expats and diplomats.
Was the circle and the singing all in English? Did it stay that way, even with the local language?
It stayed that way, yeah. It was definitely an English one. We had a few Frenchmen. Cameroon is bilingual. English and French were allowed to be used at any time, and people were allowed to talk in their choice, and you can answer in your choice.
What were you doing in Cameroon then in 86?
I was working with the American Save the Children. I was their deputy director.
What was the environment like for a group like the Hash? Was public drinking, singing, partying? How'd the community react? Did you stay underground or what was it like?
That was very open. This is Africa, and Cameroon at the time was the most consumption of champagne in the world per capita. Every little government place had a fridge in their office with champagne in there, a good French champagne, of course. So they were perfectly open to drinking. And of course, there was also the local bevy as well. But really, we had no problem, and we could run through villages and they were delighted. That was something interesting to see. And of course, not always were we wearing the straightforward clothing. Sometimes wearing whatever the season was.
The founding driving force, a guy coming from KL, means he may have come from a hash that was all men, a hash that didn't have singing, a hash that didn't have hash names. What were the traditions at the beginning there?
Yeah, it's a good question. Since at that time, of course, I wouldn't have noticed that. But yeah, he wore his sarong after the run, and it was one of the KL sarong. So that was a little unusual because Cameroon men don't wear sarongs there for sure. But the runs there, the songs, yes, he had another partner. He was an American, but this other partner was a Brit, and he had been running in other places too. So they did bring on a little bit. And so we had the songs eventually too. But on the first one, I think it was principally a party, explaining what it was all about, and then asking, do we all want to be part of this thing? And they were delighted. And so we ran off and left this wonderful smelling meat cooking and got back very quickly.
How much mismanagement was there that you figured out over time, that there was a committee and things like that? Did you get involved?
No, there's no committees. No, it was just these two guys operating it. And we somehow took turns later. No, they seemed to know what they were doing, and none of us knew what we were doing. And so we just picked it up as we went along. It was very interesting. We had to run every second week, only because the ambassadors' wives had to have their cups of teas and tea things, and they were horrified that the women were all going to the hash and not to their tea parties. So they insisted that this was not going to work, except that the women hashers were upset because they were getting trouble from their own ambassadors and things. So we organized, all right, we'll do it every second week. But the other side of that was the ambassadors and their deputies came along to the run as well. So
What day of the week was it? What day of the week was it?
Oh, it was Saturday.
How long did you stay there in Cameroon once you started hashing?
No, I stayed on for at least 2 more years there. And after I joined the hash, I'd already been there for probably a year.
By the time you left Cameroon, had you hashed anywhere else?
No, there was no touring. Obviously, when we left, we went straight back to Washington, D.C., and we joined the Washington H4.
Hash House Harriers and Harriets.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good hash. When I
think you got
hashed
the order wrong. It was the Harriets and Harriers because they allowed us to come along.
first time I hashed there in the early 90s, I think, it was great to me coming from the desert where they ran through pavement, city, and there were so many parks and streams. You would disappear into thicket. It was a great place to run.
Except for the poison. So I learned to run in long socks then.
Yeah.
Now, Mother must have been the GM, was he then?
I don't know. Who was it?
Actually. He always wore purple.
30 years ago. I can't remember the time I dropped in there in the 90s who was in what. But what I do remember about that time when I just dropped in for a single run was they didn't have much of a circle. They went to someone's house to eat after trail.
Yep, they did. That's true. Yeah. And yeah, they were imitating the men's hash, which of course, as I later joined, it was very much like the early hashes. They didn't have much of a circle at all. And you went to someone's place to eat afterwards.
Who else did you hash with? How long did it take you to get to the other hashes? Of course, today there's more than 7 hashes a week in DC. What was going on there?
Yeah, we joined that hash. My ex and I, she was the diplomat and I was working with Save the Children. We joined the H4 there, Washington H4, and there were others that we could join. And so we did join the white spot on the dark road or something, dark spot on the white road. I'm not sure what it was. And the full moon hashes, the other ones which were from time to time. We enjoyed the hashing there. And it was good to see all bits of Washington that you never see normally.
And what about the traditions? Or would be a little bit different than Cameroon was, and then each of those clubs. What did you end up developing preferences and what you liked most with hash runs? What did you like about hashing?
No, still really, we're just surprised at how this worked around the world or this in another place. So we're watching pretty carefully. I've learned long ago, you don't burst into anything or make any suggestions or do any changes or even make the suggestion. Most of them don't like it. You sit around waiting for a while before you come up with any bright ideas.
Were you able to get involved in mismanagement there at any of the clubs?
No, because I think they knew we were about to leave again. We were there for a year and then we took off again. My ex was reposted to Fiji. There'd been a coup in Fiji and a bloodless coup. They had hit on the U.S. messenger saying who had to carry the U.S. government doesn't approve of coups these days. And so he got a hard time and he asked to be left out. And so we went down there because I had known Fiji quite a bit before him.
I have to ask you what year that was because coups back a few decades ago, they were not irregular in Fiji. So what year did you get to Fiji?
That's a good question. I could probably look up my CV and see that, but it must have been about 91 or something like that. Yeah.
And what was the hashing scene in Fiji then?
It was going perfectly strongly, coup or not coup, and there were nighttime. Nobody was allowed out after 6 o'clock or something like that, but the hash was allowed out. And because we had the head of the police running, it was an older hash. They were quite well established. Senior doctors were there, and they were all Fijians. There was actually not so many expats and more locals, people, both European and Fijian mates who were there all the time, who had lived there. Well organized, they knew where they had to go. We did party in people's homes. We did our on-ons, but back in someone's home. And they knew about the singing and everything else, and it was pretty wild. But it was all male. But because of the coups, then the women came along. There was a women's hash, but they joined in with us for the party at the end. They did their own little run somewhere else, but it was on the same night. I think for protection more than anything else.
Oh, so then the men had a trail and the women had a trail, and then you had a kind of a joint on after.
Yeah, which is often the case. That people were looking for partners as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's that. Okay. At that point, by the time you're hashing through the end of your Fiji stay, had you hash traveled yet?
From Fiji, no. And I don't even know if there was one operating at the other end of the island. No, there was no talk of that at all. Oh, just a moment. That time from Fiji. Yes, actually, I did. Yes, I went up to Pohnpei and ran there on the Pohnpei hash, I think. And there were they weren't Marines, but they were the Civic Corps of Yaounde Special Civic. They were there. They were wild. And of course, they were enthusiastic and ran just like Marines. That was the first time I'd seen, if you catch the hare, you're allowed to take his pants and you run on, etc. They lost there.
And were you a front runner or a mid-pack runner? What were you then?
No, I've always been a mid-runner. I think that's what I like most of all, quite apart from the whole meeting people, the instant family when you're moving around the world. But yeah, I like the idea of those checks. And I was one of the ones who, I could run to the check easily, but I'd like to have a breather as well. And if it was a good day, then solo checks.
Do you remember how you located the hash on your trip? That was around the time the internet was maybe not yet widespread. How'd you find? Do you know how you found it?
Yeah, Pohnpei. It was Pohnpei in Federated States of Micronesia. It's the capital of Pohnpei.
How did you locate that hash?
I'd been sent there. I was there working, advising the government on local development there. And indeed, that was interesting. When I sent my CV, the guy who is from UNDP, I had to write in my CV, and my last one of the things is, and what you do in your social life. And I put, and it runs with the hash house areas. And he wrote back to me, he said, anyone who's willing to admit they run with the hash house areas must be a good guy. You're hired. Obviously, I had to run on the hash anyhow. I was happy to run it there.
And where did you go next for postings?
Yes. Let me see. To Fiji, back to the States for our language training at the Foreign Service Institute. I started running also with the White House Harriers, Hash House Harriers, and with their wonderful food trucks and beer trucks and things like this that they have, and met some of the wonderful people who, they're the characters of the runs and things like that.
Yeah, Beer Force One. Beer Force One was the name of one of their beer trucks. Who were some of the people? Do you remember any of the people that were there on that stop?
Let me see. Who was the person whose wife died in the
Spinal Tap.
Spinal Tap? Yes.
Yeah, Spinal Tap.
And Hash Humper, yeah, Hash Humper. Because they were about my age at that time. And we were all young, of course, but moving around. It was very enjoyable. It was a wonderful, wild crowd there. They're all really nice people. Where you kept moving around, but so every 3 years would be sent off to different places. But
what language did you study on that stop in DC? Where were you headed?
I was headed to Indonesia. So we had 2 years of language training with our own personal trainer. The government helped funded that, which is very good for me, because that meant I learned as well. Yes, that was the next stop, Jakarta.
What year about did you land in Jakarta? Because Jakarta had been going strong, men's hash, women's hash, everything. When did you land there?
Yes, it must have been, I should have made a little thought. I don't keep an eye on these dates at all. We had probably 3 years. So I'd have to go backwards. Oh gosh.
Mid-90s?
Yeah. So we're definitely out in the 90s. So yeah, mid-90s is absolutely right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. By then,
it was flourishing there. They're very strong.
And a lot of the Jakarta hashers travel to Pan-Asias, to Interhash. How did hashing life change being in the middle of of Asia?
I got involved in I became on-sec for the Jakarta hash there. They were really enthusiastic. And I also joined the Batavia hash, which I have to admit was probably the smartest, cleverest hash that I've ever been on. And to this day is still, if I was to say what is my model hash, but it's all male, except on the 5th of week, if there's a 5th Wednesday, then women could come along to the 5th Wednesday in the month.
What made it so good? What made it your favorite?
It was unbelievably witty. They didn't laugh about jokes. They laughed about jokes. And the circles are very clear. They went on for a long time, of course, and they would get up to 90 down downs. And of course, the down downs were all counted, and they were in the 66, and the 69, and then all the threes and all the other things. And there were some big pots that you had to do. And of course, all the beer was delivered to us via the company's beer truck. And we had ladies to serve it to us. So you couldn't be caught in a circle without your cup full. That was another down right there. Most of us had drivers. They had the hot water up on the top of the van by the time you got back to the car, and people washed off and then went into the circle. Yeah, it was very clever. And of course, they have wonderful weekends away as well. They really knew how to organize. And with Jakarta, that was also a wonderful singing hash, and they did sing a lot there too. But when I arrived in Jakarta, unfortunately, my surname is Brown. And so, of course, I had been called Brown Eye at one stage. And when we got there, then there was Brown Eye. He was a well-known person there. And so I couldn't have the same name as him. And so I got renamed. That's where I got the name
Violet, you're called. Do you remember why they picked Violet?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Obviously, they were conscious that I had been Brown Eye. And so they were thinking of that and brown and then the normal thing. One of the songs there is Sweet Violet, sweeter than the roses, covered all over from head to toe, covered all over in sweet violets. And it has all the other verses, a long one. And the tradition there is if the person is called into the circle who has the song name, they have to sing that song. It was quite a compliment to get a song name. And of course, it went shit brown, shit violet. That's how the logic went. Typical hash stuff. As I say, 3 steps away. Then when I went back to the Jakarta hash on Monday, they said, "Oh, we can't have you like that. We got to call you Violence." That bit I did not like. I can't imagine where violence came from. It's the best they could do, which is, again, the difference between the wit between one of the different hashes.
Brown Eye, sure. Everybody's inter-hashed over the many decades met Brown Eye. Was a great guy with some great stories. Who else was there?
Oh, my gosh. I can't remember the names now. It's a long, many years ago. I'm getting old.
All right. We were doing a lot of away trips. Did you get to the regional hashes?
Yeah.
Asia,
I went to the
inter-hash.
Yeah. From Batavia, we traveled back. That was the first inter-hash I went to and came back to Auckland, back to Rotorua. So that was my first.
So what you're saying, it sounds like you must have been in Jakarta in 1994 if you traveled to Rotorua for inter-hash.
There you go. Yes, that's absolutely true.
So a big contingent went from Jakarta to Rotorua?
Yes, quite a big contingent of all the hashes. But Batavia set one of the runs as well. And that was one of their traditions, was to set a run as well. And that went on to other ones, other hashes.
So Rotorua was a great event, but probably bigger than anything you'd been to in the region. How did you like the giant size, a couple thousand people in Rotorua?
Yeah, it was very well organized. Of course, it was my first. It was also the year that Canberra, the tequila, they had introduced. They were just starting it to get New Zealanders in drinking this stuff. And as you probably know, they handed out free F5 free things. And most of the Asians wouldn't touch them, so they passed them over us for a badge or something. So we happily swapped them, and they were more keen on the food vouchers and things. And of course, there was no problem with food anyhow. There's so much food there. No, I was very proud of the fact that New Zealand could do that, because I had never, ever heard of I'd seen the hash in New Zealand, but I'd never run on it. So to this day, that was the first time I'd actually seen New Zealand hashes. It was great. I had no trouble there, and people looked after us. The police, of course, helped us get home at night, and things, protected us from the taxi drivers who were rewarding us, charging.
Had you been to Rotorua yourself before?
Oh, yes. Yeah. As kids, we'd camp in lakes and some of the hot water lakes and things like that around there. Yeah, no, I knew the area pretty well. Not as a hasher for sure, and running up and down the streets, shouting loudly and things.
Have you made the inter-hashes since then? Has that been something?
Yes, I went to the one in Cyprus, and that were in Batavia again, set the run to the giant penis run up the hill. And so I was then part of the organization of that as well. I'm delighted to see that everything was going strong. We were doing well.
How long did you stay in Jakarta?
We were there for 4 years. I was RA and Grandmaster of TGIF. Thank goodness it's Friday. There. I didn't establish it, but I was one of the early members of that too. And then as people left, then I took over in each of these positions. So yeah, that was good.
And by now you've got serious senior mismanagement into your blood. Where did you go next? Once you've done senior mismanagement, a lot of positions for a long while, is that something that you just say, this is me? And where'd you go next? And what was your opportunities?
Now, at one stage, even when I was in the Jakarta men's hash, and every week you produce these mugs, the jugs like this. And of course, and I had organized it, got it well down so that it was all produced, all for free, of course, because the juries pay for it, and getting the names done onto it so they were accurate. But people would moan and say, oh, it's not the right name, or it's not this. And of course, they put the name, they think I can't do that engravers on. And there was just complaining. So at one stage, I was sitting down in this management, talking over our meeting. I said, it's really tiring. And someone wise person said to me, Alan, if you're not enjoying it, don't do it. And so you said, you're right. And the next meeting, I said, all right, I resign. And so I really moved down. But that was good. You're not enjoying it. There's no point. You're meant to be enjoying it somehow. I was mostly Batavia after that. And we got to Kuching hash, was the old Pan Pacific hash, and a few down in Bali as well. Oh, those were amazing. Just every time you go and you see just how well people organize things, it impresses me immensely. And getting the hashes all to do the right thing, I find it extraordinary given who we all are. But so let me see, back from all language training, then, we also acquired a son then. And so the son, that was interesting. We were adopting a son. You didn't quite know when this was going to happen. It took over a year to do all the organization, to get all the paperwork and things like this. They say, we're working on it. Of course, the very weekend they ring us up, we had organized a weekend away. My wife and I had organized a weekend away with everything there. We suddenly had to say, you weren't going to say, no, we don't want to pick up this child you've just got. We went this poor kid. We have photos of him. His first meeting with us almost is with a beer in his hand as well. And he was a good hasher for a long time, actually. But yeah, 6 months old, and he was at his first hash right there on that day. And we had to bring along a baggage so that we could be doing the work that we were meant to be doing as well.
So that was an adoption in Indonesia? Yeah.
Very rare. They don't allow it normally. It's almost a 2-year gestation period.
Wow. You went back to DC, more language training. What language and where were you headed next?
We headed to Russian language there, and just 1 year, and headed to Kazakhstan.
And what did you find there for hashing?
Oh, there was a hash, but it's a TianShen hash, which is the name of the Himalayas on the northern side of the Himalayas. So it's actually the Chinese name for the Himalayas, TianShen. I think the Kazakhs had accepted it as the name as well. There was the TianShen hash, but it only ran in summer. But it was very popular and well organized. They had these beautiful party balls once a year, very well organized and extraordinary efforts and things like that. And that fell in line with what I'd seen in Jakarta. There was at that time, they had these massive balls there too, so to speak. And it worked very well, but it always seemed a little bit odd that they didn't run in winter. So eventually I was the RA for a long time there. And when the GM left, then we immediately established to run all.
Really?
Yeah. And Almaty, the capital was Almaty at the time. It's since moved. It's a beautiful place, very nice there. Sun, not every day, but most days, but very cold. Of course, there's snow there, but running through the snow was beautiful. The problem was putting the flour. We tried yellow flour, but unfortunately that looks like dog pee when they pee. So you couldn't pick that up. We tried seeds, but the birds were all eating the seeds. And secrets from the embassy was probably the safest thing, the ground ups. And at that stage, they weren't getting weird. So it was ground up paper mostly.
You've been to some of the off beaten track places, some of the major cities in some of these countries in the Pacific and Asia. Any run-ins with the authorities? A lot of these hashes had officials on them. Did you have any events with white powder scares or anything like that?
Yep. But if I could just back up, there was one interesting thing for at least both for the TianShen hash. We claim we had the highest run in the world, the highest hash in the world. At the quite a ways away, there is a mountain. It's one of the highest mountains in the Russian area. So it's where they go for all their training. And it's before they're going to climb Mount Everest. And people go there. And so there's a base camp up there, up on the plateau at about 3,500 meters. We decided we were going to have a hash there. We thought we were going to do the hash up on this base camp there and on the plateau, a beautiful glacier, the sounds of crushing ice falling off the hill, a mountain. And to get up there, you had to get into an helicopter, an ex-Russian helicopter left up in Glasnost. They're massive. I think only the Russians had these things at the time. America never had mountains to look after, but they had this whole mountain range. They were beautiful machines, and they'd left them at Glasnost. They've been taken over by the locals, who probably were the people who were flying them anyhow. But no money for the maintenance. We got there, we ran up, and I think I worked out it must have been at about 3,500 meters high. Yeah, in a helicopter. All of us running in a circle around them because it's a military thing, big enough to run around in a circle while the pilot is also passing back the vodka. So we drank all the vodka we had taken. We got up to the base camp and drank all the vodka dry up there. And they didn't mind because they said, there'll be another delivery tomorrow. These things fly up at that time, once a day, I think, with more deliveries. So yeah, and there would have been 25 people in the helicopter. So there was a lot of people to witness this. And we think it might have been the highest. We're going pretty special as well.
La Paz, Bolivia always said they were the highest regular meeting hash. I don't know.
Yeah, that's probably true. We're not regular.
Health was. Was there a T-shirt made for that event?
No, there wasn't a lot of T-shirts, and we didn't have the company sponsors and things like that. And I don't think we fully understood quite what it was. You had to catch a bus, and then you had to catch, oh my gosh, it's amazing how it all seemed to work out. I did have a very good committee there, and we did have sponsorship. So I don't know why there wasn't for that. Don't remember anything about it. We should have.
Have you been dragging your hash gear, your hash T-shirts from Jakarta and those places around the world with you?
Yes, they had tons and tons of the things from all around the world. They are well traveled. They in boxes. Yeah. Yes. If someone else is paying for the transport, then you tend to do that.
You've been RA for different hashes, and were there people that you think back, that's how you formed? How did you form your RA circle style? Any influencers?
Yes, that's interesting thing. I think Mother's style. He was a good RA as well, and Washington 8-4. That was probably my second hash, but so maybe I was impressionable. But he had a very witty. Yeah, I think that was the cleverest that I've seen. And yeah, maybe the TianShen. They were pretty witty. They were clever. Bright people.
What is your approach to running a circle as an RA?
Pretty severe. No talking or any of that stuff. No hats on the circle, and severe in as much as finding excuses to give downs. Getting as many people as possible a down, and making sure that people are not being missed out, because that can happen. Just the popular people or the easy targets are there. Making sure everyone gets somehow in there, even if it's below profile. Yeah, just making sure everyone is involved. Oh, yes, come to think of it, Batavia would be another good example of the RAs. But actually, the whole circle somehow seemed to look after it because everyone else was nubbing anyone else. And there was, charges from the floor were all those there. Yeah, embarrassing people that they'd been caught. But I always felt that it had to be I didn't want to know about the sports and anything else, or someone's favorite sporting team or anything outside of the hash. It had to be related to the hash. Otherwise, I don't think politics gets dragged in and things. I don't know. That was, they want to be about the hash.
Yeah. Okay. Now, there's quite a, hey, just pop your head in. They show, look, there's a Violet. Hey,
All right, now I see
oh,
you. Yes.
you see it.
How are you? I was kind of having trouble figuring who all these are. Great. Nice to see you too.
To go back to work. All right. What the biggest difference in hash circles, every club's different and has different culture, but the difference between a circle at your local club where you know people, it's a routine, and then circles at big events. Have you run circles at big events, or what do you think about that? Because we end up having those circles. I've run a lot of big event circles. It's a completely different thing than doing it with you.
Yeah. I can at least admire them. I was at the Euro Hash recently, and I was admiring how difficult. Fortunately, they had 3 or 4 hours moving around, getting, because as you say, that they're coming from different places, so they don't necessarily understand all the same systems. It's admiration. I've never had to do it. I mean, the most we ever had was getting up to 100, 130 in TianShen. Those were big circles. And of course, sometimes you get some very big circles too. I've never had to run anything like the 200. I'm not sure that would be very enjoyable. I think it's a labor of love for sure.
How do you behave in a circle when you're not the RA?
I've done that. I'm currently in Auckland hash. It's a men's, one of the early traditional ones, and their style. We've changed the style a little bit, but I keep a pretty low profile, though I can. But of course, just me can't always keep my mouth shut as well.
How long have you been back in Auckland?
I've only been back here 4 years now, and it was quite interesting coming back here because in between times, I transitioned from being a good husband and into being and with another male partner now. And joining the Auckland hash, they had not ever heard that Rule 6 had been not abandoned at all, or at least in modified. So they were still doing that Rule 6 thing or Rule 3, whatever it is. And so I basically it was pretty nasty. And I had to say, if you want me to stay here, you're going to have to accept the fact that the rest, I'd been RAs elsewhere, I've been GMs in many places. And I figured I'd been GM, 5 different hashes, and people, that was no longer an issue. So they had to learn quite quickly. They had a committee meeting and decided, maybe we need to be very careful here. And so I am now accepted, but it still slips through sometimes. And if it just slips through, it's funny. But we've had some issues where one guy didn't get the message or didn't get the memo and cannot save himself from calling someone a homo or something like that. They do the work themselves nowadays. You've got to grow up.
So what were some significant stops between Kazakhstan and getting back to Auckland?
Yes, of course. There was lots of stops in between Kazakhstan back to South Africa. And so I ran with the Jacarnada hash, and that ran halfway between Pretoria and Jakarta. Not terribly successful. Yeah. So we tried to, and then we established our own prisoner of war, POW, hashing on Wednesdays. Mm-hmm. Pretoria on Wednesdays, POW was the POW hash. We had a really good GM there, and I was the RA, and then eventually I became the GM there too. Excellent runners there, small groups, but we had good weekends away as well.
Who was that GM?
Yes, it was a Moroccan, and he was the number 2 in the Moroccan embassy. And I didn't think what it was. Gosh, I should have. You don't use the hash names now, so you talk about it.
Yeah, I think realistically, hashing up through those mid-90s, there's a lot of us that had no idea what the civilian names of people we had known for a decade were. It's only Facebook that we know people's names, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, where else? You've gone Asia, South Pacific, all the way North America. Where else?
And always coming back. And probably somewhere there, I joined also. I was dignified enough to join the men's hash, and I got invited to come along to their hashes as well.
The DCH3.
Yeah, DC. And that was very interesting. Yes, it must have been just, yeah, because when we came back and we set our runners, we actually got them the mugs sent from Jakarta. They all got a mug at the end of the run. And so that definitely became the run of the year for them. They were just so pleased. And that was good. I enjoyed them too. It's a very different style. And it gives you a hint. I had run with the mother hash, and that was equally disorganized and with no organization. Yeah, I had seen what these primitive hashes are like. Not when I say primitive, early hashes. And you do understand that there was a movement forwards, and how we picked up bits and pieces, you get an idea. And I had met Cumberland Bill, yes. And the hashes are enduring there. And I was getting a feeling of how big this really was and how significant it was around the world, because I'd already seen a lot of it, and how welcoming people were too. So it became almost a church for me. Yeah. And my children also got to know people very well, to the point where my son, I think, when it was time to go home, he would say, no, and everyone, others were going down to the pub. He would be the one that said, no, let's not go on now. You send Mum home and you come with us. And he would sit up by the bar just there, and very good friends. It was, so yes, it definitely was a family thing. They understood it. People would help with the trolleys and the pulling things up over mountains and ice and snow and things. So your question was, where next? Then to Romania and Bucharest. That was not as well established. It was a small hash and a little bit more difficult to run, but they were strong amongst themselves. But so it was one of those places where you have to hold your tongue and not recommend any new changes. They were happy with what they had. We did get onto television there. One of the guys came from Nauvoo Television. He was making a travelogue, one of the travelogue people, and he came down to run specifically on the hash. That was on television for a while. That was about it there, from there to Australia. We didn't have to go to language training for that one.
Yeah. Which city? That's a big place. You can hash all around the entire perimeter, or sometimes in the middle.
Yeah, it's not in the Canberra hash, the capital hash there. And there were some older gentlemen there who were well known as well, part of the global committees and things like that, with establishing it. And that was good. I was allowed to be the RA there for a long time. And they had a tradition that only Australians would be the GM, but they allowed my predecessor was a New Zealander as well. So they allowed us to be RAs. And at the very end, they got together and they said, Meet, please, you've met Meet. He claims he is a New Zealander, but he's been living there for a long time. So he said he is the first New Zealander who'd been there GM. That's probably true now. He corrected me. So I was the first New Zealander who actually was a Kiwi to be their GM there too, I claim. I was privileged. I took that as a compliment that they let me do that.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. We'll get you and Meet together in a couple of weeks and battle this. Yes. So were you able to hash outside of DC any of your stops while you're living in DC on those times?
That's a nice question. There are a few who went just down the coast, but no, I don't remember going to any. Oh, of course, I later moved to Vancouver and ran on theirs, but that's Vancouver, Canada, not Vancouver, America. I'm trying to think of it. No, I didn't go to any big runs there or anything like that.
So how long did you live in Vancouver?
By that time, I was separated. So now we were living in New Zealand. I do like winters. So we'd live in New Zealand in summer and then move every 6 months and move up there. We had an apartment there and then come backwards and forwards until COVID arrived, and they wouldn't allow non-Canadians into the place during COVID.
Wow. How did COVID affect hashing in New Zealand?
Yes. Yeah, it stopped the one truly. And Auckland hash is one of those ones that's getting older and older. So there were quite a few older men who would not come even near the hash for fear of their health and things like that. Of course, the government was also discouraging a lot during lockdowns. Some of us, they did have this is where the run is going to go, and just run it any time during the day. You may just run past us or not. And if you run past us, like pop in for a drink or something like that, or we might have beer can in our pockets, which we'll share on the hillside or something. So it was done that way. The people who like to count their runs were able to keep putting up their numbers of runs. I was never bothered about counting the number of runs. To me, it was more the society, the joining the people. That was more important than the number I'd run anywhere.
You're still going to have a guess. How many trails?
Yes.
You can be plus or minus 500. How many trails do you think you've been on?
Oh, no, I think it'd be well up to 500. Yeah, it has to be, because I definitely have 3 mugs with 100 on them anyhow. So if it's every week, then and when you're the RA or the GM, you tend to be there every day, except on when you get your annual leave. Yeah, it has to be over 5. I would say 1,000 easily.
Thinking back to COVID, and we've completely come out of it now. I think that whatever effect it had on hashing has taken place already. Does it seem like a long time ago, or how does COVID feel?
Yeah. Yes, it seems like a long time ago. People have forgotten about it now. Yeah, everyone came back. In terms of personal lives, it had a major effect for me and my partner, but not the hasher effect. No, he's not a hasher, so.
Let's talk about the future of hashing. The issues we talk about replacing aging out hashers, and the different government, more imposition of where you can drink driving laws. Everything's changing, and it's not changing in the direction that makes irreverent public behavior more accommodated. What do you think about the future of the hash? I think if you think back to 1986 and were dropped back in there, you'd recognize the hash. And so would those people time machining ahead 40 years. But what about 50 years from now? Do you think the hash will be the same, recognizable? Will it still be here? What do you think?
50 years, goodness me. I'm not going to be alive then.
No, neither am I, but what do we do?
Tell me 20 years ago, I can think 20 years in advance, perhaps. There are 2 very different things going on in the US and in Europe, particularly the US, that we say. It seems there's plenty of young people coming into it. Now, you may have a different point of view, but from what I had seen, some of the older runs were getting old, but they were working out, all right, there's the married people, then there's the hashes where you've got party up and are running from hotels, from stations, metro stations and things. And that's the matchmaking, looking for a partner things and good fun party stuff. So that's quite a nice way that is working out, because it's a double function thing. But in Auckland, I haven't seen that happen. There's so many other options, and there's so many running. There are people running. There are people doing also, and they're right past my house sometimes in the morning. In Auckland, I know they got grumpy because the young people were drinking too much beer, and more than they were drinking. So that's actually chased them away. And also, they're wealthier, so they can put up with fees. And that's probably how they managed to get rid of younger people. So we have one person now who is under 50, perhaps, but that's it in Auckland. And they've tried, but they don't like the idea of using Facebook or anything. So they're still very away. They don't have a young heart. I don't know. I think that it's because they're going to die, Auckland hash. And also a lot of Auckland and New Zealand hashes, they don't seem to be getting younger people. There's a few. It seems to me like Nelson has a younger heart down there, a crazier system and a little bit more flexibility there. And they're moving in New Zealand. And the US, I think it's going strong. Taken a very different thing as New Zealand for the interhash, where they saw all the hash names. The local community were very upset by that, and we had to deal with that. For us, in terms of police and things like that, there's no problem. They still understand who the hash is. We can drink on the corners of the places, and no one has ever stopped us. For the beer, the alcohol problem, there's plenty now in New Zealand. There's lots, and I'm sure it's also around the world. There's tons of very good zero beer options. And they're actually making all the options there, hazy pale ales and all those things, IPAs. So they're handling that, and all the downs and down with a zero. And that probably is worse than having to drink beer, frankly. Yeah. I think they've handled that. They've handled the idea of being able to run anywhere we want. What's going on down in Queenstown is a little bit odd, and I think it's a very unusual place anyhow. It is a tourist resort area. I think there's tourist resort rules and regulations, but most of New Zealand, you can do pretty much what you want. So I don't think that's the freedom of running and the freedom of singing in our places and singing rude songs or whatever it is. I don't think that's been a problem so far.
New Zealand's out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, not really that close to anywhere else, but we traveled to Kiwi Nash Hash. How many Kiwi Nash Hashes have you been?
And that was the first one. Because I
Oh,
be
it
here
was.
fairly often. Yeah, yes. I think it's the first time I've been in New Zealand when there was one here. Because I've only been back for years here, and then I'm only here for 6 months of the year. But it will be, if it's in summer, then I probably will be going to them. I did enjoy it, that's for sure.
So you're going to be hashing in Vancouver regularly again for several months?
No. We got rid of the apartment there. We got back after 2 years, and we weren't allowed in there. The whole condo management were mortified of the people who had been in there because we hadn't selected them. We lost 2 things. The Australian couple had to quickly run back to Australia. They had a young couple of Canadians who thought they had a good job at the university, were so happy, and then the university suddenly had no students, so they got dismissed as well. So we got the bottom of the barrel. We weren't there to pick them because we'd used up all our friends' goodwill. And they stayed and stayed. There was no way anyone could get rid of them until the end of COVID.
Wow.
We got the place of shit.
What do you do for the other 6 months a year then when you don't want to be at Auckland?
I don't know. Now it's Euro. And so this year I went to Euro Hash and I went to the Dublin Irish Hash as well. So that was good. It's given me an excuse to go and explore Europe now.
You've covered a lot of the world. Is there any places you want to go visit for hashing or just you haven't been yet?
I enjoy hashing and I haven't seen much of Europe actually. Most of my working life was in places in developed places, and places where either USAID or someone else needed help. So I'm actually discovering it. I'm not a very good tourist. I like living in places, but not popping through for 10 days or anything like that. I was looking at south of Portugal, and that looked like a pretty good place to find a house and have a 6-month house there. And nowadays, in the Algarve, there's some good airline connections now, international connections and things.
Sure.
So you can move in and out of the airplane.
Cool. All right. Can you imagine that the hash was inevitable for you? Or if you hadn't found the hash, I guess your life would be quite different.
Yeah, it's very odd how, and I gather it's quite usual that people do not run on their own, didn't know about hash house harriers in their own country. It's only when they go overseas as expats working. And I guess they're desperately looking for connections. But I will say, boy, the thing I advise people when they're traveling overseas and going to work overseas and stay for a while is join the hash. You're going to get the most honest reply of where to buy a car, where to do it, who does the best television connections. It's honest and it's not biased. Whereas if you ask any market man, they're going to give you the one they get the biggest profit from. And you're with a crowd of people who are going to look after you and make sure you're on good feet and they're going to tell you where. So I would say that is still, it's important. To me, it was a very important thing. And I can't imagine how we would have survived otherwise, since I'm not very religious.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's easy to be in a group and appreciate it and say, oh, there's nothing like this. But it really is hard to imagine another worldwide group that is like the hash, that has that safety, camaraderie, and kind of transparency.
Yeah. I do worry a little bit about people who had 3,000 runs in this one hash. I admire it that they're stuck in there, but yes, it's a good number. But it means they didn't run anywhere else, anywhere in their life. There it is. We have them, and they are maybe the very basis of keeping those things going because they help hold their team together. But they do get stuck, I think, in some of their traditions as well. And it's very healthy to see. That is, of course, the other beauty around the world. Every hash has its own style, its own traditions and things like that, particularly the more enlightened hashes around.
You still sing the Violet song?
friends who know what it's about do. But when I come into the circle, that's them who's meant to sing the song, not me. Instead of he's a hash of true and blue. We got Auckland to move on from, and with some of my friends who were delighted to have me there as another international person, so to speak. They were very pleased. At least they could get some more songs into the thing, as opposed to the 3 songs that get sung over and over again. So it's quite a bit different now. Things have changed a little bit in a very quiet sort of way.
There's one more important question about hash traditions. Is the RA always right?
But I'm assuming there's 2 RAs in this conversation, but yes, the RA, of course, or the DM is always right. But yes, I'm sure the RA does get it right most of the time. And I certainly had good luck with the weather, that's for sure. Now I'm not an RA. It rains every time I have a set of runs. Even when Higgins was there, he arrived here off the plane and came to my run, raining like anything. So, yeah. But yes.
You don't call him master of disaster for no reason. Yeah. So you've got and right now at this moment, you've got a hasher staying with you. She may have stayed with more hashers and had more hashers stay with her than anybody in the world.
Yes, I'm beginning to get that feeling. I wasn't quite sure, but we met in both the 2 hashes, the Euro hash and also the Irish hash. Yes, thank you, Irish hash.
Yeah, so we're talking about Crotch Thumper. She stayed. I've never been to her place in Kentucky, but she stayed with us here in Toronto. And
okay,
yeah, she should pop her head in here. Is she within shouting? Because she's one of the most widely known people.
Here she is. Yeah.
Very widely known hasher. She can hear me talking. No, she can't hear me.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Listen to one of those.
So we're finishing up with Violet here, but I wanted to mention that you're staying with them because there's of the people that hear this podcast, there's a good chance you've stayed with them or they've stayed with you.
Yes. I was just watching Megasaurus the other day and she was talking about her experience and it was, you know what? We have to interview this guy. Your stories are fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I was on a trail with Violet at the last Kiwi Nash hash and he fell down over an invisible something on the road and survived it okay.
Nothing's
okay. I'm going to
the mess of my calls.
That's right. That is what happened. All right. Anything else to add or I'll stop recording?
Yep. I think we've covered pretty much the world here. Let me just check my notes. Yes. Oh, you did want to know, had I ever had run-ins with the law or anything like that? And the only time we ever did do that was with the Washington H4. And we're sitting a run from our place down the river there. As you say, you can run into beautiful rivers easily and then into housing lots, set it with flour, of course. And all the runners ran down and never came back. And we were waiting at the place. Right? Eventually, some people do come back. It turns out they were met by the police and the fire brigade, furiously washing off this white stuff that someone had reported as laying, and I guess they thought was cocaine. And I can't imagine who would put cocaine on the ground whatsoever. Another option is that they thought we were poisoning dogs. So always I tell people this is, and put the flour in my mouth and say, it's not poison. Even in New Zealand here, I let people know as I'm setting the runs. But yes, they definitely called the police. And that's amazing. So that's it. Yep, nothing.
Yeah, that's a shared experience. I think white powder scares is another one of the shared. Let me ask you about one more thing, is the tradition of red dress hashes. Where's the first time you encountered that? Do you remember?
Oh, gosh. I think it was in Washington, D.C. And there was, but it wasn't very large. Yes, we all met up and indeed we caught the train. We ran across the big area in front of the mall there, along that, and then caught a video underground up to Arlington and got off there. But of course, everyone on the train is looking at all these people coming through and paying up the train because there were about 3 trains, people getting slow and catching them. But still, only about 3 trains. It wasn't the same when I came back later, and there's thousands doing this, and I was staggered at the size of how big it is. And now you have to make bookings or something. You have to buy well ahead.
Yeah, it's shrunk. GC red dress has shrunk again. It peaked in the early 2000s. Yeah. But,
all right.
And then it's a big thing. There'll be one, of course, at Interhash.
Oh, yes, there will be. And I'm sure that will be, again, it's sold out. I'm not sure how you can sell out a thing because people can join from the side anyway. But
it's the capacity of the food and drink at the end.
Yes, yeah. Again, I've never seen them put little tags on your arm or anything like that. I've never seen them check to see.
They will be doing that. They will be doing
that.
Yeah. H2L and I are helping out as hairs for the red dress.
Oh, got it. All right.
Yeah. So there's 7. It's going to be interesting. There's going to be 700 runners, I think, and they have to be in groups of 150 to 200, and they have Queenstown. By the time I publish this, people will have survived the event, but Queenstown will be Some people talk about different religious states that restrict hashing. I think Queenstown will be a whole new level.
Will be. And I will say that I think this is a bit like the situation, even with the original hash and Rotorua, when they heard that the 2,000 people were coming there and the amount of beer that would have been ordered in consumption and that was going to be in there, the police cancelled all leave from all the police in the whole of the Taranaki area, and they all had to be there thinking that a rugby mass group, they had never heard of the soccer in those days, but not in New Zealand, but they had heard about rugby guys drinking, and that's what they thought. But again, I don't think they have any perception of what a hash is. There's no hash in Queenstown, is there? Is there?
No.
No. So they've never seen a red dress. They've never seen just people running around like that or anything. Yeah.
All right. You and Crotch Thumper enjoy. Take care of each other. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time too, for getting all this how to organize.
Right.
To close the circle, here's the Hash Anthem sung by Mother Hash.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry